Sarah Willoughby leaned closer to her monitor, squinting at the sepia photograph of a Union soldier's family. After 6 months volunteering with the Historical Archives Digitization Project, she had developed an eye for details. Something about the child in this photograph caught her attention. The boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, stood rigid beside a bearded soldier in uniform. His eyes, there was something haunting about them. Like, "Hey, Marcus, take a look at this," Sarah called to her colleague across the cramped office space in the basement of Boston's Winthrop Historical Society. Marcus wheeled his chair over, coffee in hand. "What have you got?" "This boy," Sarah pointed to the screen. "I swear I've seen him before." Marcus shrugged. Civil War-era photos all start to look the same after a while. Those stiff poses, everyone looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. ... Double quotes. "No, it's not that." Sarah opened another digitized photograph she'd cataloged last week. "Look." The second photograph showed a different family entirely. A woman in a dark dress seated beside a Union officer, with 3 children arranged around them. The smallest boy, standing to the right, had the same hollow-eyed stare. "This could be a coincidence," Marcus said. "Or relatives. Different last names, different states." Sarah pulled up the metadata. "This is the Keller family from Pennsylvania. The first one is the Wilsons from New York. Different regiments, different photographers. Maybe the boy was adopted." Orphans were common during the war. Sarah wasn't satisfied. She spent the next hour searching through the database, driven by a growing unease she couldn't explain. Then she found a third photograph of family in Massachusetts. Different name, different regiment, but the same boy, unmistakably. "This doesn't make sense," she murmured. These photos were all taken within months of each other in 1863. He couldn't have been in all 3 places. Marcus leaned over her shoulder, now genuinely interested. "What does the documentation say?" Each photo lists him as the family's son. James Wilson in the New York photo, Thomas Keller in Pennsylvania, and here, William Gardner in Massachusetts. Rain began to patter against the small basement window, casting strange shadows across the room. Sarah felt a sudden chill as she stared at the boy's face across 3 different families. "I'm going to find out who this child really was," she said quietly. Little did she know that her innocent curiosity would lead her down a path into one of America's darkest wartime secrets, one that had remained buried for over 150 years, protected by those who would kill to keep it hidden. The following morning, Sarah arrived at the Historical Society before anyone else. The discovery of the boy in multiple photographs had kept her awake most of the night. She had searched the database until her eyes burned, finding no answers. She unlocked the basement office and powered up her computer, immediately returning to the 3 photographs. In the harsh morning light, the boy's eyes seemed to follow her from each image. There was something both vulnerable and knowing in his gaze that unsettled her. By the time Marcus arrived with bagels and coffee, Sarah had printed the photos and arranged them on the bulletin board. "I think I found something," she said without greeting. "Look at his clothing. It's slightly different in each photo, but this pin," she pointed to a small object on the boy's collar, "appears in all 3 images." Marcus leaned in. "It's too small to make out clearly. I've requested the high-resolution scans from the National Archives. They should come through today." Marcus frowned. "Sarah, we're supposed to be digitizing the Waterston collection this week. Anderson will have a fit if we don't meet the deadline. This is important," Sarah insisted. "Don't you find it strange? The same child appearing in 3 different families, all soldiers, all within months of each other during the height of the Civil War? It's interesting, sure, but... and there's more." Sarah pulled up another file on her computer. "I looked into the families. All 3 soldiers died in battle within a year of these photographs being taken." Marcus's expression changed. "All of them? Lieutenant Wilson at Gettysburg? Captain Keller at Chancellorsville? Major Gardner at Cold Harbor? That could still be coincidence. Thousands died in those battles." Sarah's phone chimed with an email notification. "The high-res scans are here." They huddled around her computer as she opened the attachments. The enhanced images revealed details previously invisible. The pin on the boy's collar became clear, a small silver circle with what appeared to be a raven etched into it. "That's no military insignia I've ever seen," Marcus said. Sarah opened another window and began searching Civil War symbolism. "Sarah?" A voice called from the doorway. They both turned to see Dr. Anderson, the Historical Society's director, standing at the entrance to the office, his gaze fixed on the bulletin board with the 3 photographs. "What's all this?" His voice sounded oddly tight. Sarah explained their discovery, watching as Anderson's face grew increasingly pale. "I see." He cleared his throat. "An interesting anomaly, but hardly a priority given our deadlines." "But, sir, don't you think—" "I think," Anderson interrupted, that you should focus on the work you've been assigned. These wartime photographs are full of inconsistencies and mysteries. Not everything has an explanation, and not everything needs one. After he left, Marcus whispered, "Is it just me, or was that weird?" Sarah nodded slowly. "Very weird." That evening, after Marcus had gone home, Sarah received a call from an unknown number. "Miss Willoughby?" The voice was elderly, quavering. "My name is Robert Garrison. I understand you've been asking about certain Civil War photographs." Sarah's pulse quickened. "How did you know that?" "There are those who monitor such inquiries. Listen carefully. You're in danger. Meet me tomorrow at the Old North Church. Come alone." The line went dead before she could respond. The next morning was unseasonably cold for September, a damp fog clinging to Boston's narrow streets. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter as she approached the Old North Church, its white steeple barely visible in the mist. She'd debated whether to come, whether the strange call was worth pursuing. But the images of the boy in those photographs haunted her, as did Dr. Anderson's unusual reaction. Inside the church, a few tourists wandered quietly, gazing at the historical exhibits. Sarah scanned the pews, looking for anyone who might be Robert Garrison. "You came." The voice behind her made Sarah jump. She turned to find an elderly man with wispy white hair and rheumy eyes. His thin frame was draped in a shabby overcoat despite the warmth inside the building. "Mr. Garrison?" He nodded, gesturing to a secluded corner. "We shouldn't be seen talking for too long." They sat on a bench partially hidden behind a display about Paul Revere. "Tell me what you know about the boy," Garrison said without preamble. Sarah described finding the identical child in 3 different family portraits, all taken in 1863, all featuring Union soldiers who later died in battle. Garrison's gnarled hands trembled as he reached into his coat pocket. He withdrew a yellowed photograph in a protective sleeve and passed it to her. "My great-grandfather, Captain Edward Garrison, 20th Maine Infantry." Sarah's breath caught. There in the photograph stood Captain Garrison with his family, and the same boy with his hollow eyes and the raven pin. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "For families now," Garrison said. "Coo. And yes, my great-grandfather died at Antietam. Who is this child? How could he be in multiple places at once?" The old man leaned closer. "Have you heard of the Shadwell Institute?" Sarah shook her head. "It was established in 1861, ostensibly as an orphanage for children displaced by the war, but its true purpose was far more sinister." Garrison's voice dropped lower. "They were using these children, Miss Willoughby. Using them as what they called grief insurance." "I don't understand." "The Union was losing men faster than they could recruit them. Morale was collapsing. The Shadwell Institute developed a program. They placed orphan children with officers' families temporarily, just long enough to take family photographs. These images were powerful motivators for officers to fight bravely, to return home to their families. And if the officers died, double, quotes, Garrison's eyes glistened with tears. The government provided substantial death benefits to families with children. "That's monstrous," Sarah whispered. "Using children as props to manipulate soldiers." "It gets worse. The children weren't just random orphans. They were selected for specific traits, certain looks, certain temperaments. The boy in these photographs, they called him Subject 7. He was placed with at least 12 different families that I know of." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. "How do you know all this?" "My father spent his life researching it after finding inconsistencies in our family history. The Shadwell Institute was officially dissolved after the war, but the truth is it evolved. It became something else, something that continues to this day, with connections to the highest levels of government. And they're monitoring research into these photographs? That's why you knew I was looking into this?" Garrison nodded gravely. "They've silenced others who've gotten close to the truth." As if on cue, Sarah's phone vibrated with a text from Marcus. "Where are you? Archives broken into last night. Your computer stolen. Anderson asking for you." Sarah showed Garrison the message. "It's starting," he said, his voice shaking. "You need to disappear for a while, Miss Willoughby. I have some contacts who can help you. This is crazy. I should go to the police." "The police can't help you." "Not with this." Garrison slipped her a small envelope. "Inside is an address and a name. Go there directly. Don't go home, don't go back to work." As Sarah left the church, the fog had thickened into a cold drizzle. She clutched the envelope in her pocket, torn between dismissing Garrison's warnings as paranoid conspiracy theories and the undeniable evidence of the boy in multiple family portraits. Something wasn't right, and someone clearly didn't want her digging deeper. She decided to make one stop before following Garrison's instructions: the public library, where she could use a computer that couldn't be traced back to her. She needed to find out what happened to Subject 7. The Boston Public Library hummed with quiet activity as Sarah settled at a computer terminal in the far corner, positioned to see anyone approaching. Her hands trembled slightly as she logged into a temporary email account. First, she searched for the Shadwell Institute. Nothing relevant appeared beyond a few mentions of a street by that name in London. Next, she tried Civil War Orphan Placement Program and various combinations of keywords Garrison had mentioned. Again, nothing substantial. Sarah sat back, frustrated. If such a program had existed, its records had been thoroughly scrubbed from easily accessible history. She changed tactics, searching instead for the raven pin that appeared in all the photographs. This yielded a single result: a scholarly article from 1978 in an obscure historical journal about Civil War symbolism, mentioning the Raven Society as a secretive Union intelligence group. Sarah scribbled down the reference, then hesitated before her next search. If someone was monitoring research into these photographs, they might be tracking specific search terms. But she needed to know what happened to the families and to the boy. She began with the Wilson family from New York. Public records showed that after Lieutenant Wilson's death at Gettysburg, his widow received a substantial pension and moved to Washington, D.C. with their son James. Except there were no earlier records of James Wilson before the 1863 photograph. It was as if he had appeared from nowhere. The pattern repeated with the Keller and Gardner families. In each case, the widows received unusually generous benefits, moved to different cities, and the boys eventually disappeared from public records. No marriage certificates, no death certificates, nothing. Sarah was so absorbed in her research that she almost missed the man in the dark suit who had entered the library and spoken briefly to the desk attendant. When the attendant pointed in her general direction, Sarah quickly gathered her notes. Heart pounding, she walked calmly toward the rear exit, fighting the urge to run. Outside, she hailed a taxi immediately, giving an address several blocks from the location Garrison had provided. As the taxi pulled away, she saw the man in the suit emerge from the library, scanning the street with purpose. The address in Garrison's envelope led to a small antique bookstore in Cambridge, nestled between a coffee shop and a vintage clothing store. A bell jingled softly as Sarah entered Tempest Library. The shop was empty except for an elderly woman behind the counter, arranging a display of first editions. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, peering over wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm looking for Eleanor," Sarah said, the name from Garrison's note. The woman's expression changed subtly. "She's expecting you. Follow me." Sarah was led through a beaded curtain to a back office cluttered with books and papers. The woman locked the door behind them. "I'm Eleanor Vance," she said. "Robert called to say you were coming. You found Subject 7. Sarah nodded. "I don't understand what's happening. Why would anyone care about photographs from 160 years ago?" "Because the program never ended," Eleanor said gravely. "It evolved. What began with the Shadwell Institute during the Civil War became Operation Kinship during World War I, Project Family during World War II, and has taken various forms since. The methods change, but the principle remains. Psychological manipulation using children to influence soldiers' behavior and to extract maximum financial benefit from their deaths." Eleanor unlocked a filing cabinet and withdrew a thick folder. "These are copies of documents Robert and I have collected over decades. We were both archivists with government clearance before we discovered the truth and went into hiding." Sarah flipped through newspaper clippings, photocopied letters, and more recent printouts. "What happened to Subject 7? To the boy in the photographs?" Eleanor's expression darkened. "That's the question that got my husband killed in 1982. We know that after the war, all of the children in the program were gathered at a facility in Maryland. Official records claim it was for their education and welfare. The truth was far more sinister." She handed Sarah a faded photograph of a grand Victorian building surrounded by woods. The Shadwell Institute's main facility. It burned to the ground in 1871. Officially, it was declared an accident. All records and all of the remaining children were reportedly lost. "You don't believe that's what happened?" "No, we found evidence that at least some of the children survived and were integrated into a new program. Subject 7 was among them. A knock at the back door made them both freeze." Eleanor motioned for Sarah to hide behind a tall bookshelf while she approached the door. "Who is it?" she called. "It's me, Robert." Eleanor unlocked the door, but as it swung open, it wasn't Garrison who entered, but Marcus, Sarah's colleague, his face ashen. "They've got Robert," he said, closing and locking the door behind him. "And they know Sarah came here." Sarah stepped out from behind the bookshelf. "Marcus, how'd you find me? What's going on?" Marcus ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I followed you from the library. When I saw that man trailing you, I got worried." "You followed me?" Sarah's voice rose. "How did you even know I was at the library?" A moment of uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "Because he's been watching you," Eleanor said quietly, her eyes fixed on Marcus. "Haven't you?" Marcus's expression shifted, a flicker of something cold passing across his features before he regained composure. I was concerned. After the break-in at the archives, when you didn't show up for work, he turned to Eleanor. We need to move quickly. They're searching this entire block. Eleanor didn't move. How did you know Robert Garrison was taken? Marcus hesitated just long enough. I overheard them at the Historical Society. Dr. Anderson was on the phone. Sarah felt a creeping dread. Marcus, I never told you the name of the man I met at the church. The atmosphere in the small room changed instantly. Marcus's shoulders tensed as he realized his mistake. Eleanor, with surprising speed for her age, pulled open a drawer and withdrew a small pistol. Step away from the door. You don't understand, Marcus said, his voice now harder, stripped of its earlier concern. This is bigger than you know. Sarah stumbled onto something that goes far beyond some Civil War orphan program. Then explain it to me, Sarah demanded, feeling betrayed and frightened. Have you been reporting on me this whole time? Marcus sighed. Yes, but not for the reasons you think. I was placed at the Historical Society 3 years ago after we detected unusual search patterns in the archives. Someone was piecing together the Shadwell records, searching for evidence of the program. That someone turned out to be Garrison. Who is we? Eleanor asked, the gun still steady in her hand. I work for a division of the NSA that monitors historical information with national security implications. Sarah laughed bitterly. National security? We're talking about the Civil War. No, Marcus said firmly. We're talking about a continuous government program that has existed for over 150 years. A program that has evolved from placing orphans with officers' families to something far more sophisticated and essential to national security. He reached slowly into his jacket, careful with Eleanor's gun trained on him. I'm going to show you something. It might help you understand. He withdrew a photograph and handed it to Sarah. It was a modern color image of a military family, a Marine in dress uniform, his wife and their 2 children, a girl about 10 and a boy around 8. The boy's eyes made Sarah's blood run cold. This was taken in 2019. The Marine is Captain Michael Reynolds, who died in Syria 6 months after this photo was taken. He produced another photograph. Another military family, another child with the same hollow eyes. This can't be possible, Sarah whispered. These children, they can't be the same boy from 1863. Not the same boy, Marcus explained. The same genetic line. The Shadwell Institute wasn't just placing orphans with families. They were breeding them, selecting for specific psychological and physical traits across generations. Children who could form quick emotional bonds and who elicited strong protective instincts in adults. Eleanor lowered the gun slightly, her face pale. Genetic manipulation in the 1860s? That's not possible. Not manipulation as we understand it today, Marcus corrected. Selective breeding. The Victorians were obsessed with inheritance and bloodlines. The Shadwell Institute took it further, applying it to psychological traits. But why? Sarah asked. Why continue this for over a century? Because it works, Marcus said simply. Soldiers with these children and their family photos fight more aggressively, take more risks, and this is key. Their families accept their deaths with less resistance, less questioning. The children help with the grief process, make the sacrifice seem more meaningful. Sarah felt nauseated. That's monstrous. It's practical, Marcus countered. War is inevitable. This program reduces resistance to it, generation after generation. Eleanor raised the gun again. And what happens to the children after the soldiers die? Marcus's face remained impassive. They're reassigned. New families, new attachments. They're well cared for. They're exploited, Sarah said angrily. Used as emotional manipulators. They serve their country just like their host families. The sound of vehicles pulling up outside interrupted them. Marcus glanced toward the window. That will be my colleagues. I'm sorry it's come to this, but you need to understand this program is classified at the highest levels. The fact that you've discovered it presents a serious security breach. Eleanor moved quickly, pressing a button hidden beneath the desk. A section of bookshelf swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. Sarah, go, she commanded, keeping the gun trained on Marcus. There's an exit to the alley. Take the folder. As Sarah grabbed the research and moved toward the hidden door, Marcus made his decision. He lunged not for Eleanor or the gun, but for Sarah, grabbing her arm with unexpected strength. You can't run from this, Sarah. They'll find you. The sound of the front door of the bookshop being forced open echoed through the building. They're here, Marcus said. Make the right choice. Sarah's mind raced as she stood frozen between Marcus's grip on her arm and the escape route Eleanor offered. The sound of heavy footsteps in the bookstore grew louder. In one fluid motion, Eleanor brought the butt of her pistol down on Marcus's wrist. He yelped in pain, releasing Sarah. Go, Eleanor hissed, shoving Sarah toward the hidden passage. Take the service stairs to the basement, then follow the tunnel. It leads to the river. An old friend named Hawkins has a boat at the dock. Tell him Shadwell and he'll help you. What about you? I'll hold them off as long as I can. Sarah clutched the precious folder and darted into the passage. As the bookshelf closed behind her, she heard the office door burst open, and Eleanor's defiant voice, "Gentlemen, this is a private establishment. Do you have a warrant?" The passage was dark and narrow, lit only by dim emergency lights along the floor. It smelled of old books and damp stone. Sarah felt her way forward, descending a spiral staircase that seemed to go deeper than a normal basement. The tunnel below the stairs stretched ahead, its brick walls slick with moisture. Sarah moved as quickly as she dared, listening for sounds of pursuit. The folder clutched against her chest contained what might be the only evidence of a centuries-old government program that used children as emotional pawns. After what seemed like an eternity, the tunnel began to slope upward. A rush of cool air suggested she was nearing an exit. A metal door appeared, partially rusted but unlocked. It opened onto a small wooden dock on the Charles River, hidden beneath an overhanging tree. An old man sat in a weathered fishing boat, smoking a pipe. He squinted at Sarah as she emerged from the tunnel. "You Eleanor's friend?" he asked, his voice gravelly from years of tobacco. "Are you Hawkins?" "She told me to say Shadwell." The old man nodded once and gestured for her to get in the boat. "Been expecting someone, though you're younger than I thought you'd be." As Hawkins steered the boat away from the dock, Sarah glanced back at the shoreline. No signs of pursuit yet, but that wouldn't last long. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe. For now." Hawkins navigated the river with practiced ease. "You found him, didn't you? The boy in the photographs." Sarah stared at the old man. "How do you know about that?" "Because my grandfather was one of them. One of the Shadwell children." He avoided her eyes, focusing on the water ahead. "Not Subject 7, but Subject 12. They called him the Comforter. Placed with grieving families after soldiers died." The boat rounded a bend in the river, revealing the Boston skyline in the distance. "My family's been hiding from them for 3 generations, Hawkins continued. "Changed our name, moved constantly, but they never stopped looking. The program must be protected at all costs. But why? Why is this so important to them?" "War requires sacrifice," Hawkins said grimly. "And sacrifice requires compliance. The Shadwell program ensures that military families accept their losses with minimal resistance. No protests, no demands for accountability, no questioning of government decisions." He guided the boat toward a dilapidated boathouse partially hidden by overgrown willows. "But it's more than that," he continued. The children themselves, they're valuable. They have abilities. Empathic abilities beyond normal human capacity." Sarah thought of the hollow-eyed boy in the photographs, his gaze somehow both vacant and all-seeing. "Are you saying they can read minds?" "That's impossible. Not mind-reading, something more subtle. They can sense emotions, manipulate them, form attachments quickly, ease grief. It's why they were chosen in the first place. Back in the 1860s, the Shadwell Institute found these children, studied them, bred them." The boat bumped gently against the boathouse dock. Hawkins tied it off and helped Sarah onto the weathered planks. "We don't have much time," he said, leading her inside the boathouse. "They'll be tracking you. They've got resources we can't imagine." The interior was surprisingly well equipped, with modern communications equipment contrasting sharply with the decrepit exterior. "This is one of our safe houses," Hawkins explained, activating a computer system. "A network of people who've been affected by the Shadwell program over generations. We've been gathering evidence, building a case. To do what? Expose them. To end it. To free the children." Hawkins inserted a flash drive into the computer and began copying files from it. "Add what you've found to our database. Every piece helps complete the puzzle." Sarah opened the folder, spreading its contents across the table. Hawkins examined the photographs of Subject 7 with grim recognition. "I've seen this one before. He was one of the originals, one of the strongest. Marcus said the program continues today, that they're still using children from the same genetic line." "Yes. The current iteration is called Project Heritage. They've refined their methods over the decades. Now they don't just place the children temporarily, they use artificial insemination, surrogate mothers. The children are biologically related to their host families, but still carrying the Shadwell genetic markers." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the scale of the conspiracy. How many people know about this? Only those at the highest levels of government and military intelligence. To everyone else, these are just normal military families making sacrifices for their country. A sharp beeping sound came from one of the monitoring devices. Hawkins rushed to check it. "They've found Eleanor's tunnel," he said, his voice tight. "We need to move. Now." He grabbed a backpack from a locker and began filling. with essential equipment and the research materials. Where can we go that's safe from an organization with government resources? Sarah asked, helping to gather the papers. Not where, who. We need to find the source, a living Subject 7 descendant, someone who can testify to what's been done to them and their kind. Hawkins handed Sarah the loaded backpack. According to our intelligence, there's a young man in Chicago who might be our best hope. His name is Ethan Gardner. The name struck Sarah like a physical blow. Gardner? Like the Massachusetts family in the original photographs? The same bloodline. He's been having dreams, memories that aren't his own. He started asking questions. How do we find him? I have an address, Hawkins said, scribbling on a piece of paper. But we'll need to split up. They'll be expecting us to travel together. Outside, the distant sound of helicopters grew louder. The Amtrak train swayed gently as it sped westward through Massachusetts toward New York, the first leg of Sarah's journey to Chicago. She sat by the window, a baseball cap pulled low over her face, watching the autumn landscape blur past. Hawkins had insisted they separate, arguing that two targets would be harder to track than one. He would take a different route to Chicago, meeting her near Ethan Gardner's last known address in 3 days. Trust no one, he had warned before they parted. The Shadwell program has operatives everywhere: police, transportation, hospitals. Use cash only, stay off social media, and keep moving. Sarah's hand moved to the inner pocket of her jacket, feeling the outline of the thumb drive containing all of their evidence. She had memorized Ethan Gardner's address and his apartment in Chicago's Wicker Park neighborhood, and destroyed the paper Hawkins had given her. The train announcer called out their approach to Springfield, Massachusetts. Sarah tensed, watching as 2 men in dark suits entered her train car from the forward door. They moved slowly down the aisle, scanning the passengers' faces. Sarah turned toward the window, heart hammering. In the reflection, she could see them pausing to speak to a conductor, who pointed toward the rear of the train. They continued past her seat without a glance. She exhaled slowly, waiting several minutes before rising and moving in the opposite direction, toward the dining car. She ordered coffee and a sandwich, paying with cash, then found a seat facing the door to watch for the men in suits. Her mind raced with questions about Ethan Gardner. If he was indeed a descendant of Subject 7, what would he know? Had he been placed with a military family? Was he even aware of his own significance? The train continued westward as night fell. At the Albany Rensselaer station, Sarah disembarked, changing her planned route on instinct. Instead of continuing to Chicago by train, she purchased a bus ticket to Cleveland, where she could catch another bus to Chicago. It would add hours to her journey, but might throw off any pursuit. The Greyhound station was nearly empty at that late hour. Sarah found a hard plastic chair in the corner with a view of both entrances and settled in for the 2-hour wait, fighting exhaustion. She opened her laptop, a cheap model she'd purchased with cash at a big box store outside Boston, and inserted the thumb drive. The files were extensive, decades of research by Eleanor Garrison and others who had discovered pieces of the Shadwell program. Birth records, death certificates, military service files, and photographs. Hundreds of photographs spanning over 150 years. All showing children with the same hollow eyes, the same unsettling gaze. One file caught her attention: Subject 7, Lineage. It contained a family tree of sorts, tracing the descendants of the original boy from the Civil War photographs. Many branches ended abruptly with notes like terminated age 12 or harvested age 8. The clinical language made Sarah's skin crawl. Ethan Gardner appeared at the bottom of one branch, born 1994, mother listed as surrogate number 47, father unknown. A notation beside his name read, "Observation ongoing. Potential aberration." Sarah wondered what aberration meant in this context. Was Ethan somehow different from other Shadwell descendants? Had he escaped their control? The Cleveland-bound bus arrived, and Sarah boarded, choosing a seat near the emergency exit. As the bus pulled away from the station, she caught a glimpse of a dark sedan with government plates pulling into the parking lot. Her pulse quickened, but the bus was already merging onto the highway. Sleep came in fitful bursts during the overnight journey. Sarah dreamed of the boy in the photographs, his eyes growing larger until they swallowed her whole, plunging her into a darkness filled with the sounds of battle and grief-stricken wails. She awoke with a start as the bus pulled into Cleveland at dawn. Without waiting for her connection to Chicago, she took a taxi to the airport and purchased a ticket on the next flight, using the last of her emergency credit card funds before destroying the card. 3 hours later, she landed at Chicago O'Hare, took the Blue Line into the city, and then transferred to a bus that would take her within walking distance of Ethan Gardner's address. Each step of the journey, she scanned for followers, changed her route unpredictably, and kept moving. Wicker Park was bustling with midday activity as Sarah approached the address, a converted warehouse with artist lofts. She checked the directory in the lobby. E. Gardner, apartment 3B. As she reached for the buzzer, the front door opened and a young man stepped out. He was in his late 20s, with dark hair and eyes that stopped her cold, the same hollow, knowing eyes she had seen in the photographs. But there was something else there, too. A wariness, a haunted quality. "Ethan Gardner?" she asked, her voice barely audible. He froze, studying her face with an intensity that made her step back. "Who's asking?" His voice was low, cautious. "My name is Sarah Willoughby. I need to talk to you about the Shadwell program, about your ancestry." Ethan's face drained of color. He grabbed her arm, pulling her into the building and toward the stairwell. "Not here," he hissed. "They're watching the apartment." As they climbed the stairs, he spoke urgently. "How did you find me? Are you one of them?" "No, I'm working with people who want to expose what they've done, what they're still doing." They reached the third floor. But instead of going to 3B, Ethan led her to a maintenance door that opened onto a fire escape. "We can't go to my place. It's not safe." From the fire escape, they crossed to an adjacent building via a narrow plank bridge that looked thoroughly unsafe. Ethan moved with practiced ease, suggesting he'd used this route before. The adjacent building was under renovation, empty of workers on the weekend. Ethan led her to a small office space with a desk and 2 chairs. "I've been expecting someone," he said, locking the door behind them, "either to help me or to eliminate me. I wasn't sure which would come first." "Eliminate you? Why?" "Because I've stopped cooperating." Ethan's hollow eyes fixed on her with frightening intensity. "And because I remember everything." Ethan Gardner paced the small office space, his movements fluid yet tense, like a caged animal. Sarah noticed his hands, artist's hands, with paint embedded around the nails and calluses on his fingertips. "What do you mean, you remember everything?" she asked. "What exactly do you remember?" Ethan stopped pacing and faced her. "Not just my memories. All of them. Every life, every family, every soldier who died thinking I was their son." Sarah's skepticism must have shown on her face because Ethan laughed bitterly. "You think I'm crazy? I thought so too at first." He moved to a canvas bag in the corner and withdrew a sketchbook. "These started when I was a child. My night terrors, as my mother called them. I'd wake up screaming, then draw what I saw." He handed Sarah the sketchbook. The first pages contained crude, childish drawings, but with disturbing details: Civil War battle scenes, men with missing limbs, women in black mourning clothes. As the pages progressed, the art became more sophisticated, but the subject matter remained consistent: war, grief, children with hollow eyes. "I was placed with the Gardner family when I was 4, Ethan said quietly. "Captain Michael Gardner, Marine Corps. He deployed to Afghanistan 6 months later and was killed by an IED 3 weeks before he was due to come home." Sarah looked up from the sketchbook. "You were aware? Even then?" "Not consciously, not at first, but the dreams came every night. Faces, names, battles from different wars. My therapist diagnosed PTSD, said I was processing my adoptive father's death. But how could I have PTSD from the Civil War, from World War I? Vietnam?" He took the sketchbook back, flipping to the middle pages. "When I was 12, they came for me. Said my mother was having trouble caring for me alone, that they had a special school for children like me. That's when I began to understand what I was." The drawings from this period showed clinical settings. Men in lab coats, other children with the same hollow eyes. "The Shadwell program operates a facility in northern Michigan," Ethan continued. "Officially, it's a treatment center for children with PTSD from military families. In reality, it's where they study us, train us, and prepare us for our next placements." "How many children are there at any given time?" 20 to 30, ranging from infants to teenagers. All descendants from the original subjects, all with varying degrees of the trait. "What trait?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to understand. "Empathic resonance. The ability to absorb and reflect emotional states, to form instant, deep bonds with strangers, to make them feel protected, understood, loved." His voice turned bitter on the last word. "We're emotional manipulators, bred for the purpose." Sarah thought of the photographs, the boy standing beside different Union soldiers, each man looking at him with the same expression of fierce protection. "But the memories, you said you remember past lives?" Ethan shook his head. "Not past lives, past placements. The genetic line carries emotional memory, passed from generation to generation. Most of us only get fragments, flashes. But sometimes, in rare cases, the memories come through intact. Like with you." "Yes. I remember Thomas Wilson standing beside his father at Gettysburg. I remember James Keller watching his mother receive the telegram about Chancellorsville. I remember William Gardner's mother weeping into his hair after Cold Harbor." Ethan's voice had taken on a distant quality. "I remember all of them. All the grief, All the loss. Sarah struggled to process what he was telling her. This is impossible? Ethan interrupted. That's what I thought too. Until I started researching the names, the battles, the families from my dreams. Everything matched historical records. Details I couldn't possibly have known. He moved to the window, peering through dusty blinds at the street below. They realized what was happening when I was 16. The memories were becoming too integrated, too coherent. I was asking questions, making connections they didn't want made. They classified me as an aberration, a failure in the breeding program. So they tried to eliminate you? No, worse. They decided to study me, to figure out why I was remembering so they could prevent it in future generations. His hand unconsciously moved to his temple where Sarah now noticed a small scar. Brain scans, spinal taps, experimental drugs. 3 years of my life in that facility. How did you escape? Ethan turned back to face her. One of the doctors, Dr. Helshi, helped me. She'd been growing uncomfortable with the program for years. When she saw what they were doing to me, she smuggled me out during a staff rotation. Gave me a new identity. Money to start over. And you've been hiding ever since? But they never stopped looking. He returned to the sketchbook, flipping to the most recent pages. These drawings showed men in dark suits, surveillance equipment, faces that Sarah recognized Dr. Anderson from the Historical Society, and most disturbingly, Marcus. They found me 6 months ago, Ethan said grimly. Offered me a deal return to the program voluntarily for humane study, or they'd take me by force. What did you tell them? I agreed to weekly monitoring, blood draws, psychological evaluations. Buying time while I figured out a plan. He ran a hand through his dark hair. But they're getting impatient. Last week they tried to sedate me during a routine examination. I fought back. Injured one of the doctors. I've been on heightened alert since then. Sarah opened her backpack and removed the thumb drive. This contains everything we've gathered about the Shadwell program, going back to the Civil War. With your testimony, your memories, we might have enough to expose them. Ethan took the drive, weighing it in his palm. Expose them to whom? The government runs the program. The military benefits from it. Would believe us. The public. The families of the children being used. We don't need everyone to believe, just enough people to make it impossible to continue in secret. A sound from the hallway made them both freeze. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving with purpose. Ethan quickly returned the thumb drive to Sarah. There's a service elevator at the end of the hall. Take it to the basement, follow the utility tunnel to the next building. Go to the Harding Museum on Lakeshore Drive. Find Dr. Eleanor Halle. Tell her I sent you. Eleanor Halle? You mean the doctor who helped me escape? She's been building a case against Shadwell for years. She'll know what to do with your evidence. But what about you? Ethan's hollow eyes seemed to look through her rather than at her. I'll lead them away from you. Give you time to reach Dr. Hale. They'll capture you again. Maybe. He gave her a sad smile. Or maybe this time I'll make them see what they've done. What they've created. The footsteps stopped outside the door. A voice called out, Mr. Gardner, we know you're in there. This doesn't have to be difficult. It was Marcus's voice. Sarah moved toward the service elevator, but Ethan caught her arm. Wait, he whispered. There's something else you need to know. His voice was urgent, barely audible. The Shadwell program isn't just about manipulating soldiers and their families. The children were engineered for something more specific. What? War requires public support. We don't just help individual families accept loss. Our genetic line influences collective grief processing. During major conflicts, Shadwell descendants are strategically placed in media, psychology, even politics. We shape how the nation processes war casualties. Sarah's mind reeled at the implications. You're saying the program manipulates entire populations? Why do you think America accepts endless wars with so little protest? It's not just propaganda, it's us. Our emotional influence amplified through carefully chosen positions of cultural power. A hard knock rattled the door. Final warning, Mr. Gardner. Ethan pushed Sarah toward the service elevator. Go. Find Dr. Halle. Tell her about the media placement program, codenamed Shepherd's Voice. It's the key to everything. Before Sarah could respond, Ethan moved to the door and called out, I'm coming out. Don't shoot. Sarah slipped into the service elevator as Ethan opened the door to face Marcus and 2 armed men in tactical gear. The last thing she saw was Ethan's hollow eyes meeting hers briefly before the elevator doors closed. The basement was dim and musty, with exposed pipes running along the ceiling. Sarah followed them as Ethan had instructed, finding the utility tunnel that connected to the adjacent building. Her mind was still processing. Ethan's final revelation that the Shadwell program extended beyond military families to influence national attitudes toward war. She emerged into an alley behind the building and walked briskly toward the main street, fighting the urge to run. The Harding Museum was nearly 3 miles away. She hailed a taxi, giving an address 2 blocks from her actual destination as a precaution. The museum was an imposing neoclassical building overlooking Lake Michigan. Sarah paid the entrance fee and slipped inside, scanning the visitor map for staff offices. According to the directory, Dr. Eleanor Hale was the museum's director of historical archives. Finding her way to the administration wing, Sarah approached a receptionist. "I need to see Dr. Hale. It's urgent. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but she wants to see me." "Tell her it's about Ethan Gardner." The receptionist's expression didn't change as she picked up the phone. After a brief conversation, she said, "Dr. Hale will see you." Down the hall, last door on the left. The office was spacious and elegant, with large windows overlooking the lake. Dr. Eleanor Hale was a striking woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and piercing blue eyes. She rose from behind her desk as Sarah entered. "Close the door," she instructed, her voice cultured but tense. Sarah complied, then turned to face the woman. "Dr. Hale, Ethan Gardner sent me. He's been captured by the Shadwell operatives." If Hale was surprised, she didn't show it. "Sit down." "Tell me everything, quickly." Sarah gave her a condensed version of the past 72 hours, finding the photographs. Meeting Garrison, escaping with Hawkins, finding Ethan and his capture. She handed over the thumb drive. "Ethan said you've been building a case against the program for years." Hale inserted the drive into her computer, scanning the files rapidly. "Yes, since I helped him escape 5 years ago. I've been documenting evidence of the program's existence and its violations of basic human rights." He mentioned something just before he was captured. Shepard's Voice, a program to place Shadwell descendants in media and politics to influence national grief processing. Hale's head snapped up, her eyes widening. "He told you about that?" "Yes. Is it true?" "It's worse than he knows." Hale rose and moved to a bookshelf, removing several volumes to reveal a hidden safe. From it, she withdrew a thick file folder. The Shepard's Voice initiative began during World War I, when the government realized the potential of using Shadwell descendants to manage public opinion. She spread photographs across the desk, images of hollow-eyed individuals throughout the decades, all in positions of influence. News anchors, psychology researchers, political speechwriters, grief counselors. These people, they all came from the program? Yes. Specially selected and groomed for maximum emotional influence. During Vietnam, they placed 17 Shadwell descendants in key media positions to soften public resistance to the war. After 9/11, they activated 32 operatives across all platforms to shape the national grief response and build support for military action. Sarah studied the photographs, recognizing some faces from television and newspapers. How have they kept this secret for so long? Compartmentalization. Most Shadwell descendants don't know what they are or why they've been placed in certain positions. They're just told they have special empathic gifts that can help people. Only a handful of government officials know the full scope of the program. A notification popped up on Hale's computer. She clicked on it and a news alert expanded on the screen. Terrorist suspect apprehended in Wicker Park. The grainy image showed Ethan being led into a black SUV, his face partially visible. "They're already controlling the narrative," Hale said grimly. "Once they have him back in the facility, he'll either be permanently confined or conditioned to forget everything he's remembered. We have to help him. We will. But not by charging in blindly. We need to use their tactics against them." Hale turned to Sarah with a determined expression. "You found the photographs. You tracked down Ethan. You've pieced together more of this conspiracy than most people ever have. You're our best chance at exposing the truth. What do you want me to do?" The annual National Security Conference begins tomorrow at Navy Pier. Every major intelligence agency will have representatives there, including some who aren't aware of Shadwell's true nature. If we can present our evidence to them directly, bypass the usual channels, they'll try to stop us, undoubtedly, but they'll be expecting me to make a move. They've been watching me for years. Hale fixed Sarah with an intense gaze. "They won't be expecting you." Outside the museum windows, dark clouds gathered over Lake Michigan. A storm was brewing, both literally and figuratively, as Sarah considered what Hale was asking her to do. "What about Hawkins?" "He's supposed to meet me tomorrow. Robert Hawkins has been working with me for years. I'll contact him, bring him in on the plan." Hale closed her computer. "Tonight you'll stay in a safe location. Tomorrow we make our move." As they prepared to leave, Sarah asked the question that had been nagging at her since meeting Ethan, the original boy Subject 7 from the Civil War photographs. What happened to him? Hale's expression darkened. According to the records I've found, he died in the Shadwell Institute fire in 1871. But Ethan's memories suggest otherwise. If he truly remembers being that child, then what? Then the Shadwell program is even more sinister than we thought. It would mean they've been manipulating not just genetics, but something deeper, something we don't yet understand. Morning sunlight glinted off Lake Michigan as Sarah approached Navy Pier, the massive convention center buzzing with activity. The National Security Conference had drawn hundreds of officials, analysts, and contractors, all passing through metal detectors and security checkpoints. She adjusted the lanyard around her neck. Dr. Hale had provided her with legitimate credentials as a historical research consultant, allowing her access to the conference floor. The thumb drive, now containing both her evidence and Hale's comprehensive documentation, was securely hidden in a specially designed compartment in her shoe, undetectable by standard security measures. Remember the plan Hale had instructed earlier that morning? Find Deputy Director Collins of the Intelligence Oversight Committee. He's one of the few high-ranking officials who isn't compromised by Shadwell. His panel starts at 10:30 in Ballroom C. Approach him after. Mention Garrison's legacy and he'll know to listen. Sarah moved through the crowded exhibition hall, scanning for familiar faces from the Shadwell operation. Hawkins had failed to make their rendezvous the previous night, and Hale's attempts to contact him had gone unanswered. They had to assume he'd been captured or compromised. As she neared Ballroom C, she spotted a familiar figure by the entrance marcus, dressed in a dark suit, scanning the crowd with practiced efficiency. Her heart rate spiked, and she ducked behind a large display for a defense contractor, calculating an alternate route to the ballroom. A hand touched her shoulder, and Sarah nearly cried out. "Easy," a voice murmured. "I'm a friend." She turned to find an elderly man with a conference badge identifying him as Dr. James Whitfield, DARPA Historical Research Division. "Dr. Hale sent me," he said quietly. "They've identified her coming into the building. She's creating a diversion, but they'll be looking for you too. Follow me." Whitfield led her through a service corridor, bypassing the main entrance to Ballroom C. They emerged near the stage where the panel was already underway. Deputy Director Collins sat at the center of a row of officials discussing information security protocols. "Wait until the Q&A, Whitfield advised. Then use this." He handed her a conference question card. When the moderator finally opened the floor for questions, Sarah raised her hand, clutching the card. To her relief, she was selected almost immediately. "My question is for Deputy Director Collins," she said, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "Given recent historical revelations about classified human experimentation programs like MKUltra, what oversight exists today to prevent similar ethical violations?" Collins leaned toward his microphone, his expression thoughtful. "An important question. Today's intelligence community operates under strict ethical guidelines and congressional oversight specifically designed to prevent the kind of unchecked experimentation that occurred in the past. Any human subject's research must go through rigorous review boards, and even programs like Shadwell," Sarah interrupted, abandoning the script, "or Project Heritage, or Shepherd's Voice." A hush fell over the ballroom. Collins stared at her, his expression unreadable. Several security personnel began moving towards Sarah. "I have documentation," she continued rapidly, "of a continuous government program dating back to the Civil War that uses children for psychological manipulation of military families and public opinion about war. I need to speak with you privately about Garrison's legacy." The security team reached her, flanking her on both sides. "It's all right," Collins said, standing. "I'll speak with her. Bring her to the green room." Sarah was escorted to a small room behind the stage, where Collins joined her moments later, accompanied by a woman she recognized from Hale's files, Assistant Director Meredith Chun of the NSA, potentially one of the Shadwell program's supervisors. "That was quite a public accusation," Collins said, his tone neutral. "I assume you have evidence to support it?" Sarah glanced warily at Chun. "I'd prefer to discuss this privately." "Assistant Director Chun has the necessary clearance for any intelligence matter," Collins assured her. "Now, you mentioned Garrison's legacy. Robert Garrison was investigating the Shadwell program when he was captured by your people. He was working with Eleanor Halley and others to expose a century-long conspiracy involving genetically engineered children with empathic abilities." Chun and Collins exchanged looks. "You have documentation?" Chun asked. Sarah hesitated, then decided to take the risk. She removed her shoe and extracted the thumb drive. "Everything is here. Historical photographs, military records, facility locations, and testimony from one of the subjects, Ethan Gardner." Collins took the drive but didn't immediately move to a computer. "Miss Willoughby, I understand you believe you've uncovered something sinister." But I assure you, if such a program existed as you describe it, it would represent a gross violation of current intelligence ethics protocols. It does exist, Sarah insisted. Ethan Gardner was captured yesterday in Wicker Park. Dr. Eleanor Halley is somewhere in this building right now, possibly in custody. Robert Garrison and Daniel Hawkins are missing, all because they tried to expose this. Chun pulled out her phone and made a brief call, speaking too quietly for Sarah to hear. After she disconnected, she turned to Collins. Sir, I believe we should continue this discussion in a secure location. There's been an incident at the north entrance. Collins nodded and gestured for Sarah to follow them. They exited through a back door where a black SUV waited. Sarah hesitated. I'm not going anywhere until I know what's happening. Miss Willoughby, Collins said firmly, if even half of what you're alleging is true, this is not a conversation to have in public. Please. Against her better judgment, Sarah entered the vehicle. They drove in silence through downtown Chicago, eventually arriving at a nondescript office building. Sarah was led to a conference room where, to her shock, Dr. Halley was waiting, looking disheveled but unharmed. Eleanor? Sarah exclaimed, are you all right? I'm fine, Halley assured her. They intercepted me at the entrance, but she glanced at Collins. Apparently there are still some people in government with consciences. Collins inserted the thumb drive into a laptop and began reviewing the files. His expression grew increasingly troubled as he scrolled through decades of evidence. If this is authentic, double quotes, he began. It is, Chun said quietly. All eyes turned to her. The Shadwell program exists, Director Collins. It has operated continuously since 1861, through various iterations and under different code names. Sarah stared at Chun in disbelief. You're admitting it, just like that? The program's existence isn't the revelation you think it is, Miss Willoughby. What you've uncovered, Chun glanced at the screen, is the unsanctioned evolution of what began as a legitimate intelligence operation. Legitimate? Hale's voice rose. You call using children as emotional manipulators legitimate? The original Shadwell Institute was established to study empathic anomalies discovered during the Civil War, Chun explained. Children with unusual abilities to form emotional connections, to ease suffering, to help families process grief. Yes, they were placed with officers' families, but the intent was therapeutic. And the breeding program, the genetic manipulation? Was that therapeutic too? Sarah demanded. Chun had the grace to look uncomfortable. The program evolved during the eugenics movement of the early 20th century. Certain administrators began selective breeding without proper oversight. By the time the ethical violations were discovered in the 1970s, the program had already established itself as essential to national security operations. So instead of shutting it down, you continued it, Hull said bitterly. Reforms were implemented, Chun insisted. Modern iterations like Project Heritage operate with medical supervision and ethical guidelines. The children are well cared for, their abilities developed to help families and communities process trauma. In Shepard's voice, Sarah asked, using these people to manipulate public opinion about war? Collins turned to Chun, his expression hardening. I'm not aware of any such operation. Chun hesitated. Shepard's voice is specialized application of the program's resources. A national security measure implemented after 9/11. Illegal psychological manipulation of the American public is not a national security measure, Assistant Director Collins said sharply. It's a violation of everything we stand for. Where is Ethan Gardner? Sarah interrupted. What have you done with him? He's at our facility in Michigan, Chun admitted. He's being evaluated and treated. His condition is unique. The memory integration he's experiencing wasn't supposed to be possible. What about the others, Garrison? Hawkins? Chun looked away. Robert Garrison died during questioning 3 days ago. A heart attack brought on by stress. Hawkins was apprehended last night attempting to access our Chicago field office. He's in federal custody. The room fell silent as the human cost of their pursuit of truth sank in. Finally, Collins spoke. This ends now. I'm invoking my authority as Deputy Director to place the entire Shadwell program under review. All subjects are to be secured for their safety. All operations suspended pending congressional oversight investigation. You don't have the authority, Chun began. I believe I do, Collins countered, particularly when presented with evidence of unauthorized human experimentation continuing for over a century. He turned to Sarah and Halley. I'll need your full cooperation to document everything you know. And what about the children currently in the program? Halley asked. What happens to them? They'll be protected, Collins assured her. Proper care protocols will be established. And Ethan? Sarah pressed. I'll personally oversee his case, Collins promised, if what you've told me is true about his memories. He may be the key to understanding the full scope of what's been done. As they continued discussing next steps, Sarah's mind returned to the hollow-eyed boy in the original photographs. How many lives had been manipulated, how many families influenced, how many wars made palatable through the exploitation of these children with their special empathic gifts. The truth was finally emerging, but the shadow of Shadwell's legacy would linger in America's history, a dark chapter of emotional manipulation, spanning generations, all in service of making the unacceptable acceptable, the endless cycle of war and sacrifice. In the coming days, as congressional hearings were arranged and classified documents prepared for review, Sarah would learn that the program's influence extended even further than they had imagined. The Shadwell descendants had shaped national grief responses to every major conflict and tragedy for over a century, their genetically enhanced empathic abilities functioning as emotional control rods during America's darkest moments. And somewhere in a facility in northern Michigan, Ethan Gardner waited, the living embodiment of America's darkest secret, his hollow eyes holding the memories of countless children who had come before him, each one a silent witness to the true cost of war.